Good morning, everyone. It's going to be a hard act to try and follow the gentleman before us. I think he's a rock star. The subject is unbelievable. And I was actually waiting for the poker part to come up, because I think computers, how do they work out a hunch? You know, I think you can have all the numbers in front of you, but sometimes it just takes that human to say, well, is he bluffing? What's my hunch? Do I invest in this or do I not? So I think it can get you there 99% of the way, but I think sometimes there's some people that get paid a lot of money to make that final, do we yes or no, do we follow it? So today we're going to be talking about the Startup Challenge. My experience from the Startup Challenge started back in Cape Town a couple of years back, when it was still in its infancy. And we run an annual regional conference on the continent called the African Regional Conference. And when we introduced it for the first time, we ran it in parallel with the program. And then we soon found out that everybody was going to the inner tribe and not always coming to the other sessions. So now we have dedicated days to it. And it's been a huge success. And last year, we had the African Regional Conference in the Ivory Coast, which was very interesting for some bad reasons, but also some good reasons. And we had the competition once again, and the three gentlemen I have with me here today were the successful submissions of their startups. And what we're going to do now is we're going to just have a short video which will introduce you to their submissions, and then we're going to have a conversation for about 30 minutes. But during the conversation, we're just going to be discussing the gentlemen. What are they about? I mean, do you wake up? When did they realize they had this inside them? What have been their challenges in their specific countries? And then a couple of questions on, how do we get this into a bigger world?
There's just so much going on across the African continent when it comes to financial technology innovation. It seems like everybody is really interested in what's happening here now.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Tribe experience. I learned a lot.
It was quite interesting to go through the coaching. The first day of the coaching was very interesting. The idea of learning to construct the pitch with a particular cognizance of the fact that I'm speaking to banks now. And I mean, I've done a lot of pitches before, but it was mostly talking to the merchants about how our solution is good for them, and sometimes talking to the banks also why the solution is good for them just because it's good for the merchants. But I learned that I needed to speak directly to the banks about how it is good for them as banks, in addition to how it is good for their customers. So I think that's something that I took away, and it will influence how I pitch going on forward.
My pitch deck was somehow a little bit messy, but through the conference, I learned how to really perfect it, and it really helped me a lot.
So we got to coach 9 startups in a tribe, and that was the best part, because you saw the caliber of entrepreneurs. Their businesses are great, but also you saw them growing from the first coaching session to the time when they started pitching.
We were able to find a lot of key stakeholders in different areas, central bankers, both from the markets that we already work in East Africa, as well as to new potential markets for us to expand to. So I think we were able to benefit from being in an environment where there were many of these different stakeholders from different levels who we normally wouldn't interact with.
The sessions that I enjoyed the most were those ones that were talking about how we build the infrastructure for financial services in Africa, so that we have a robust structure that can finance the future and development of Africa. And I'm also excited about that because, of course, it opens up opportunities for fintechs such as ours to be part of that innovative process of building a payments and financial service infrastructure that can help the continent move forward.
I think the key thing, if you're looking to get started with a business on the continent, is that you should have a business model and be ready to make money from day one. I say this not because ideas aren't powerful, but because ultimately, if you're going to build a business here, it has to be a business. And I think in order to do that, you have to be ready to execute and be operational right from the start.
Because if you don't implement, no one is going to come and build your dream.
So if you're thinking about attending, you definitely should.
Thank you, gentlemen. Would you like to join me in front? So I think before we take a seat, I think we'll start with you, Patrick. If you just want to introduce yourself, your company, 2-minute pitch.
Hi, my name is Mwere Patrick, founder at VugaPay. Basically, VugaPay, it's a payment platform facilitating expats and diaspora to pay African merchants from their home bank accounts. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Yu, and I'm the founder and CEO of SocoWatch, which does on-demand deliveries to small retail shops in emerging markets. Currently, we supply about 5,000 micro-retailers in Kenya and Tanzania, and are looking to expand to other countries across East Africa as well.
Hi, I'm Omani Olawale. I'm the founder and CEO of Arafah Technologies. We provide a mobile point of sale solution that provides omni-channel payment capabilities to small retailers across Africa. And we help them to automate their record keeping. We provide sales and data analytics to help them improve their efficiency, and we connect them with the formal financial system. We are certified in Nigeria. We are integrated into all the banks.
Thank you, gentlemen. Right, Patrick, we're going to start with you. So, as I said earlier on, the idea of what we want to discuss here is, how did you get into this? What was the thinking? This is what I need to do. I need to be an entrepreneur. I need to do things differently. We have players in your market. What made you get up one morning and say, this is what I want to do?
So basically, starting from my high school, I was a software developer. I used to program apps just for fun, for school stuff. So after this morning, one morning, I wanted to send money for my brother who was living in another province in the countryside. So I couldn't be able to move money from one telecom to another. So this was the same challenge as same African merchants. We're not able to receive cash from expats who use PayPal and them use unbanked services like mobile money. So we were like, why can't we not create this platform, which is VugaPay, to facilitate this problem? So I found myself being an entrepreneur from just coding stuff which were just for fun. Yeah.
And if I ask the question, your friends, I mean, what do they think you were crazy when you went this? Did they go the traditional route? Or?
So firstly, when we started, they were like, the telecoms are going to eat you off. You're not going to get past them. So I didn't just listen to what they say. So I could close my ears and just focus on what I was doing. Yeah, and then I saw it through coming up. Yeah.
Excellent. Daniel?
Sure. So the idea behind SocoWatch actually came when I was living in Egypt. So I lived in Egypt for a period of time where I actually saw firsthand the challenges for small retailers to get products that they needed to sell to their community. And I'm also actually a software developer by background. And I've done a little bit of work with SMS notifications. For those of you who are not aware, in sub-Saharan Africa alone, more than 90% of the population actually has a mobile phone now. More people have a mobile phone than access to a toilet. And so this is quite an amazing statistic if you think about it, and it allows you to kind of use the mobile phone in very innovative ways that you wouldn't see elsewhere. And so for us, the idea of having an SMS-based system for you to place orders and then ultimately creating a logistics network to then fulfill those orders seemed like it was solving a really present problem in increasing access to goods in this market.
But you've got around because you didn't have a problem with getting a visa to come to Toronto.
I did not. I'm actually I'm Canadian originally, so hometown represent. But I do live in Kenya now and run the team out of there.
Good.
So ever since I was young, I've had a stubborn curiosity about pretty much everything out there. Most times they are not things that are even very useful for me, but I find it difficult to let something go once it intrigues me. I remember in high school, I spent a whole month from morning till night trying to solve a particular physics question, and I refused to ask for help until I was able to solve it. So you can imagine that when I found out one of these times when I visited, I'd been living in Finland for some years, working. I'm a medical doctor by training, by the way. I was an associate professor of public health and a pediatric surgeon. And then I came visiting Nigeria, took my mom to the hospital, and I was unable to pay for her healthcare bill in a federal teaching hospital that attended to over 5,000 patients every day. I mean, that was unbelievable. I mean, it was easy to contrast that with my experience in Finland. So the idea refused to leave my mind. And that's how we came up with Arafah. We basically created a technology that was able to do real-time payments even when there's no internet connection, got that patented across the world, and then developed that into the product. So I guess I'll put that to this stubborn curiosity.
I think there's a lot of people out there that would say you took a big chance. I mean, you qualified, so
Yeah.
it was a difficult decision or a process?
It was. I mean, it took me more than a year to actually decide to do this full-time. I was working with a couple of my friends, but when I finally did, one person I never told about it was my mom. So this day, she calls me at 3 a.m. in the morning. It's like, so I heard that you're no longer a doctor now. I was like, no, I mean, I'm still a medical doctor. It took a long time to explain to her, but she ended up by saying, okay, you know what, I'm going to pray that your business does well so that you can sell it for a lot of money and can go back to being a doctor. So yeah, I mean, it's something that will be considered very crazy to take that chance. But like I said, I mean, it's something that really gripped me and didn't leave my mind, so I had to do it. And it's been great so far.
Thank you, Manye. It's a wonderful story, yeah? Stunning. So I think the next round is going to be, we're going to focus on the countries. So clearly, as individuals, you have this idea, this is what you want to do, you want to start your own business, etc. But Patrick, once again, we start with you. In Rwanda, is there a general culture of being entrepreneurs? Now, I mean, I've read the president is really behind. I mean, he has his own conferences in terms of innovation. We read things about drones delivering medicines into the back. So there is. So, but you're at the ground level.
Yeah, so in Rwanda, like, everybody wants to start up a business, a tech business, and our president is so supportive. Like, he supports every entrepreneur who has an idea stage. So each year we run like a startup challenge. It's called Transform Africa, whereby we invite high school students, university students. They all pitch their ideas, and the 10 first, they get prizes to continue like doing their startup idea. So like in Rwanda is the most supportive country in Africa when it comes to tech innovation. Like we have the first pilot of Zplane, which is a blood transporting startup. So before they started, they were like, this is very crazy. How would drones transport blood? And our president took it into logic and said, if we take blood from a normal clinic to transport it to another clinic, and it takes 20 minutes, and the drone can take 5 minutes to transport it, why shouldn't we do it? So the president funded that project. After he funded it, they did it, and then it went worldwide. In Tanzania, they copied the same system, over in Kenya and some other West African countries. So we see that this was very innovative. Also, apart from that, like in Rwanda, there's people nowadays in the country don't pay using coins to normal transport systems. All people have cards. So the president was like, nobody should no longer use coins when going into the bus system. So now, like, everybody has a card going to the bus system. So this startup is called Tap and Go. So this has really motivated more Africans, like, to get an experience of what is the banking, what feels like to own bank accounts, because most people use cards when they're going through the transport system. Yeah.
So next year, we're actually coming to Kigali.
Yeah.
We're going to have the African Regional Conference in Kigali. So I think it's going to be interesting and I'm sure you'll be around.
Yeah, I'll be around.
Good to see you in your own home country there.
Yeah.
Now for Kenya, I mean, whenever you talk Kenya, you talk M-Pesa. So yours is the same, similar question, but when are we going to see the next generation or the next flow? Because there needs to be more. Eh?
Absolutely. So for those of you who are not familiar with M-Pesa, it's effectively a mobile money system with a virtual wallet tied to your phone number. Extremely popular. In fact, if you look at the list of mobile money leaders in the world, Kenya is number one. Beats the US, beats Japan, beats any market, it's Kenya. It's over 90% mobile money usage. And the reason for that is that you have one dominant telecom company, Safaricom, that's been able to implement pretty much universally the use of this mobile money wallet. And of course, you're talking about a market where the vast majority of the population does not have a bank account. They don't have access to traditional financial services. And the idea of having a virtual wallet that's attached to your telephone number where you can just SMS money to anybody anytime makes things very convenient. So M-Pesa has been around actually for over 10 years. As I mentioned, huge adoption, huge use. And really, I think if you're talking about what goes beyond M-Pesa, it's everything that's built on top of that. So for example, in my business, which is on-demand e-commerce type of company, we're able to collect payments from all of our small merchants, our customers, to effectively operate a cashless business in a context that is otherwise very low resource, pretty difficult to operate in. That's just one example. There are so many others. A great one, when you talk about offering kind of alternative financial services, our number of companies, Branch, Tala, a few others, where basically, of course, access to credit, access to loans is very difficult in these markets. And using some of these other startups, what you're able to do is simply download their app onto your phone, and you give it every permission possible, pretty much. It scans your social media, it scans your messages, your phone usage, all of that, and based off of that data, instantly offers you a loan. So non-collateralized loan, and it'll say, okay, based off of our scan, we'll give you a loan for $10 right now. And you hit accept, and the money gets sent right to your mobile wallet that instant. And this is providing access to finance, to liquidity that these people definitely didn't have before. And that's just one other example of the huge innovation in this market. So everything from that to, as I said, e-commerce services, to even kind of KYC. Being able to kind of partner with banks to use M-Pesa data to triangulate along with, there's other great innovations in the ecosystem, doing facial recognition to do authentication. A lot of the kind of traditional tech features that you would see here, email, password, logins, whatnot, most people don't have an email address. So how do you kind of increase access to these services without that? So having great things like facial recognition, authentication through SMS via the phone number, these allow you to work around that. So I think having a base like M-Pesa provides a great foundation to innovate in ways that are very different from traditional kind of Western markets. But besides that, there's still huge opportunity for increasing access to just kind of basic services too. So talk about access to financing, access to electricity, access to goods. These are all things that are huge opportunities in the market.
If I can add on to that, you said what's the next innovation in Africa?
Yes.
Like most Africans now are buying mobile phones, they're buying laptops, but the biggest challenge of almost internet connectivity is very expensive.
Yeah.
So people don't like buy data most. So I want to do an innovation whereby we create a local network. Like we host servers locally into Rwanda. So most people like host servers on Amazon Web Service, but hosting a server locally and like storing content on those servers locally, and then striking deals with telecoms, which can easily facilitate people to get access to that server because it's in the country, and this is going to reduce like the amount of money which they are spending on the internet. So Africans right now, what they need the most is access to cheap internet, to cheap content, because cheap content usually makes more Africans have knowledge to what's going on around the world. Most people don't even have access to YouTube. It's not because they don't know YouTube, but it's because they can get access to it.
Yeah.
So the best, like the next big thing is access to free content into Africa, cheap content. Yeah.
For Nigeria. So when it comes to Nigeria, we've heard the two cases here from Rwanda and Kenya. You want to shed some light on what is happening on the innovation side, entrepreneurs in Nigeria?
So if you look into the larger entrepreneurial scene in Nigeria, is very active. You know that it's probably the biggest. It is the biggest in Africa, actually. You probably know about Andela, the alternative education startup. that started in Nigeria, started by Nigerians. But even in the financial services space, many people are not aware of the fact that Nigeria is very much ahead of many countries, including the Western countries. For several years now, we've had a central processing and aggregation platform in Nigeria that handles all forms of electronic payments. So if I pay somebody from a different bank in Nigeria, he gets the money in 10 to 20 minutes at most. I mean, in most European and North American countries, that's still going to take at least a day. And for card payments and POS payments, settlement is done the very next day. In Nigeria, and that's been on for several years. We adopted the EMV chip and pin standard several years ago. The US just started trying to do that last year, and they had to find a workaround, you know. Instead of doing chip and pin, they had to do chip and signature because it's difficult to. So Nigeria is very innovative. Of course, I wish that Nigeria could move as fast as Kenya and Rwanda move. But then, of course, you have to consider that Nigeria is a much bigger and much more complicated society. So you can't, I mean, it's one of the laws of life, right? The smaller you are, the faster you can move, whether you're a company or a country.
So when we were preparing about this, we were talking about Nigeria. It's a very large economy. There's a lot of regulation. There's a lot of regulators. There's a lot of bodies checking up on what people are doing. So is it different in Rwanda and Kenya, or is it just, there must be something more? It can't just because Nigeria is large and Rwanda, an example, is small. I mean, so what the question is, what is the middle ground? Is a regulator are they promoting innovation, or are they stifling it?
I think anytime you're innovating, especially in markets that are as opaque, to be honest, as most African countries, you have to recognize that there's always a status quo, and there's somebody who's currently benefiting from that status quo. Yeah. And depending on who that person is, I think depends on how much resistance or how much encouragement you'll get to push your innovation. So for us, for example, I am very happy that we operate in a limited status quo stakeholder environment. So for me, more or less focused on disrupting kind of last mile delivery and obviously doing it in a tech-enabled way. I'm not dealing with the upper echelons of government, with upper echelons of banking. And so this makes what we're doing particularly smoother than it would be in other instances. I can give you an example. One of my good friends actually runs a Bitcoin startup that focuses in Kenya. So they're called BitPesa. They're operating, I think, in 15 or so African markets now, but they started in Kenya, and they were actually more or less shut down by the central Kenyan bank because they did not approve of what they were doing. And it was the type of thing where they thought the conversations were going really well, and then all of a sudden it kind of dropped off, and then next thing they know, it's not allowed. So I can guarantee that somebody was benefiting inside from that status quo, or maybe they saw the opportunity and they said, you know what, we'll just do this ourselves, and decided to do that. So the main issue, as I said, with operating in these markets, I don't think it's limited to Nigeria or Kenya. I think actually Rwanda might be more of the exception to this situation because they have, comparatively speaking, excellent bureaucracy, forms of process. You mentioned the kind of, you can register your business online in Rwanda in less than 24 hours, which to me is mind-blowing. I'm sure to you as well.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, let Patrick talk more about that.
Yeah, so in Rwanda regulation, there's no tough regulation. So everything is very easy because all the system is in one way. There's no corruption. Like you can register a business in 24 hours. Basically, it takes 6 hours to get it approved. Mm-hmm. And when you try to add shareholders, you can easily add them online without requiring you to go to RDB in person. Yeah, in Rwanda, when we also starting. They were like, we have to have a liquidity in the central government of around 500K USD. So we went to the central government and we said, we are a startup, we can't afford that money. Mm-hmm. So the central government says, since you're a startup, we're just going to allow you to operate on a specific level. Mm-hmm. And then when you get that big, you're going to pay this type of money. So this shows that our community is very supportive in terms of regulation. Mm-hmm. They know the hassle which startups we go through. So they allow us to operate without much regulation cost. And this is the same as most anybody who comes in. Like we have most Americans, Australians who come into Rwanda to start up a startup. Like we have businesses which are owned by Americans, but they started in Rwanda.
Okay.
Yeah, because Rwanda is very supportive. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I wish that every African country was like Rwanda, but unfortunately, I think most are not like that. And that's why, Daniel was saying in the interview that if you're innovating in Africa, you're starting a business in Africa, you have to already think about the market conditions and the regulatory conditions from day one. You don't have the luxury that your colleagues have in the Western world where you can just focus on the technology and then you just get unlimited capital, and you can just like Uber, just bulldoze and ignore the regulations, and you can't do that in Africa. So you basically have to make sure that from day one you can survive, and you have to understand how you navigate these regulatory hurdles, these market realities. Otherwise, there's not going to be a business to talk about.
Thank you. We've got about just less than 10 minutes to go now. So is there anyone in the audience who has a question for one of the gentlemen on stage?
Hello. I think my question will go to Patrick. Regarding the foreign remittance into Rwanda, what are the regulatory requirements? Are you flouting any regulatory rules? Because remittances coming in via VugaPay, how do you handle that?
That question, like the remittance, when you start a startup which deals in remittance, you first have to go through the central government. You pay around 500K in liquidity so that they can get approved. Like if there's a problem with your startup, that the people won't be affected. So you pay that money. So like from our part, our government is supportive on our part. Like we didn't pay that. So we have like a sandbox. Like they run a sandbox which allows startups who are dealing in payments to run that startup. When you get to that big level or when you raise money, that's when you can come and pay that money. Yeah.
Question here.
There's a question.
Hi, Adisa Tajani from Token, from London. I wanted to ask what you think the next sort of 5 to 10 years will be like within the different African markets that you look at, as a lot of the debate around Africa really kind of looks at it as one place when it isn't. There's over 50 countries with each of their individual nuances. So where do you all see your respective markets going in the next 5 to 10 years?
I can start. So as mentioned, we're currently based in Kenya, but we also have operations in Tanzania. So we are very much about expanding throughout the East Africa region and then hopefully beyond over into West and Southern Africa too. For us, as far as looking at the market, we definitely have similar challenges. I think if you talk about increasing access to everyday goods at the kind of mass market level, this is a challenge that exists across all of these markets and in other continents as well. I think for us, and more generally, the opportunity is really coming about, okay, how do you establish a singular base of operations, basically prove your concept in one market, and have that be really effective and really solve that problem, but then still find a way to scale to these other countries too. I think one of the challenges with the ecosystem is that, as you said, it is fragmented. You have 54 different countries, all with their own regulations and their own governments, political systems. However, fundamentally, in order to get to the level where most, I would say, kind of venture or growth investors are looking for, you do kind of almost by definition need to expand beyond just one country. And so kind of bridging that gap between, okay, you have a very fragmented market, but overall you have similar challenges across those markets, I think is really going to be the key to having a successful wave of startups. And for the first time, you actually are starting to see billion-dollar valuated companies. Jumia is the first one operating on the continent. And I think that's a great sign for other companies who are earlier stage like ours to hopefully kind of follow in those footsteps and become part of this big wave of African innovation.
So, like I said earlier, in Africa, understanding the market realities and consumer behavior might even be more important than your technology to determine whether you survive or not. Because it's not even, the difference is not just between countries. I mean, in a country like Nigeria, consumer behavior is vastly different in the north as it is in the south. So I think that for startups, it's very important to have this hyper-local awareness of the market that you're dealing with. And of course, as you think about expansion, it creates opportunities for partnerships and collaborations. Because if I try to expand out of Nigeria to Rwanda, for instance, it might be a lot more beneficial for me to partner with Patrick, who understands the local conditions in the market, than go and do it all by myself. So yes, you're going to have to expand, but then you have to take each market as an individual market and understand it, and not throw a general blanket over the markets, because that's going to be a big problem. I agree with that.
Anything to add, Patrick? Well, in actual fact, my last question, we've only got a couple of minutes, was so how do we have these successful entrepreneur or businesses or online businesses that have sprung up in different countries, and it's related to, so how do we get out of Kenya to service? In East Africa, it's very specific. You've got the East African community. So you should be able to do business in Rwanda as if it was in Kenya. Theoretically. But I mean, going forward, this is it. You should be able to capture the market across East Africa as a start, and then clearly, the rest of Africa is your next step. So, how do you get the regulators to understand that the markets, that you should be able to do business across borders?
I mean, we were talking about this a bit earlier, just kind of offline, but I think there's some political developments which are hopefully helpful. The development of a singular African Union passport, for the example, allowing citizens to eventually get kind of freedom of movement across the continent. The way that it currently counts, I know actually when we went to Ivory Coast earlier this year for the first conference, I was talking to a Kenyan colleague of mine, and she mentioned that it was harder for her to get the visa than it was for me as a Canadian coming in. So, stuff like that is obviously, nonsensical and just hurts kind of the freedom of movement of people and ideas across the continent. But hopefully, as these governments realize that the opportunity and the barriers that are currently in place are preventing some of this opportunity from being realized, will kind of push people in the direction. And Paul Kagame, certainly president of Rwanda, has been extremely helpful, I think, in pushing a lot of that innovative mindset. So hopefully we are growing to the point of kind of greater integration, unity, and allowing for kind of more freedom of market across these different countries.
And then in West Africa, we've got the West African monetary zone.
Yeah.
So, and you got Ghana right next to Nigeria. Is it similar?
No, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, it's easier for me to travel to or do business with a company in the UK or US than it is to do business in Cameroon or in Ghana. Just for 1 minute, imagine that the entire African continent became cohesive for business, and movement of people and goods and businesses was easy. That's 1 billion people. We can easily rival the kind of power that India and China have. And if you just imagine the potential, it's mind-blowing. I think that the regulators are beginning to recognize that. I wish very strongly that they will move a lot faster than they are, because, these opportunities will not wait for anyone. What you're having now is that Chinese companies are coming and taking these opportunities that African companies should have taken, because while the African government will not listen to their own companies and startups, they will easily give that opportunity to a Chinese company that is coming. We need to change that. And I think that the other thing that will change that is, as we begin to see more and more startups begin to do awesome things, get great valuations, and begin to have traction, then it becomes more difficult for the government to ignore the startups. And hopefully that will change things, because there's a lot of potential that can be unlocked.
Thank you. Anything you want to add, Patrick? You're fine. Okay, so we've come up to the end. We've got a couple of seconds left. Maybe there's one person has a question. I think there were a couple of hands. If you want to, okay, we'll have one more question. The lady there on the right.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I would like each one of you, if possible, to dispel one of the biggest myths you heard from the Western media. Because I live here, and you read some things, and you know definitely it's not true. So, what are the biggest myths, and you would want the participants to take away?
Okay, so one of the one that ticks me off the most, I mean, at the beginning of this, I wasn't this mature. I actually worked out on an investor. Is the thinking that the only kind of business that you can do in Africa is for the poor people, and there is no real economic opportunity in Africa. So, I mean, I had to tell one of the investors that the GDP of Nigeria is twice that of Finland, and he couldn't believe it. So this kind of thinking that the only business you can do in Africa is what you do for the poorest people, and your only reward is going to be in heaven because you're not going to make any money, that's not true.
Thank you.
Most people think like in Africa we have many forests, many animals. People don't have access to education and what. But Africa has the highest number of youth who are very educated and know what to get done. So Africa is the next big continent and the place to be in.
I think for me, when I talk about what we're doing to outside investors or stakeholders, the biggest thing that always comes up is the access to technology. So as I mentioned earlier, this idea where, in fact, the fastest growing population when it comes to access to technology, and the fastest growing population when it comes to use of mobile money, of online services, is the sub-Saharan African market as a whole. And so for me, developing a business there, I think, once again, just riding off of this, there's real economic opportunity in the market. And if you ignore it, you will be late. And it's the same thing that people said about India, about China, about Brazil. And the fact of the matter is that this market is going to grow and is going to become a behemoth. And so if you're just going to wait around and wait for that to happen, you're going to be too late.
Thank you. I think we've run out of time. But the gentleman will be around, so we can have a question. You can have a discussion with them. Thank you very much. I think we've gone from one place to another, but thank you very much for the discussion, and look forward to seeing you in Rwanda. And the next session will be, and I'll call up Lida. She'll be hosting the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you very much, everyone. What we will do now before we release you is walk you through what comes next, so that you can know how to plan your day and hopefully stay with us for the rest of the day. So those of you who were with us first thing in the morning, you heard Dr. Go. One of the best presentations I've seen in all my Cybos is, if you missed it, hunt down the people who were there and hear more about it. After the session now, we're moving in a bit of a gear change. Guys, can I ask you to move away so people can see the screen? There's a bit of a gear change for the rest of the day. We're moving into business model innovation. We're going to be looking at inspiration from other industries to teach us what it is we can pick up and take away from those who have faced very similar challenges in different contexts. So the next thing that will be happening in this room right after the break is system thinking. What can we learn from healthcare, from a heavily regulated, heavily contested, massive industry that has had to go through the types of challenges we're going through now? After that, we will be all decamping into a bigger space for the future of money debate in the plenary room. It's the same group of InnoTribe people in a different, bigger space. Please stay with us. After that, we're moving into FinTech Hubs EMEA. Those of you who are loyal to InnoTribe, you know that we always follow the various hubs we work with. We follow the progress, we follow their growth. So join Adija, who just asked a question a few moments ago, and a few other familiar faces to hear what has happened since you last saw them last year, how the space is maturing. We're staying right here after that to talk about one of my most exciting and intriguing topics, platform economics. We've spent most of this week talking about monetization of APIs, building platform economies. But we don't necessarily know what that looks like for our businesses. So we will have the opportunity to hear from someone who's done it, who's made it happen, who's built a platform business and monetized it very, very successfully. Anything with the word Apple in it usually needs no introduction. But again, the idea is, what can we as bankers, not the sexiest of businesses necessarily, what can we learn from the most iconic business that has brought the whole concept of UX front and center? And then finally, the debate that seems to be always with us, even though it's always changing. Disruption has come to become our new normal. Emergent tech seems to be coming at us from all directions. For a long time, the belief was that if you partner with startups and you work with startups and you invest in startups, you will guarantee your future. The debate closing the day here is that true? Please stay with us for the day. Please rank the sessions you've attended on the way out. Let me move to a bit of housekeeping. If you do nothing else with Inner Tribe today, join us for the Inner Tribe party. You'll get a chance to meet and speak to everyone you heard today and everyone you heard the days before. It's also in one of the coolest venues in Toronto, I hear. If you haven't registered, grab someone with a crew badge and ask them how to do that. As you know, every year Inner Tribe partners with a cause or charity. This year is Save the Children on the back of the devastating earthquake in Mexico. If you're enjoying the amazing coffee outside, please part with $1 or $2. It's for a very, very good cause. And that's it. Please pick up 2 things: a star and rate your sessions, and an Inner Tribe magazine. If there was something that happened yesterday and you thought, oh God, oh yeah, Exhibit A for my lovely assistant. If there was something that you thought, I wish I knew that was happening, then this is what you need. It's the guide for the rest of the day, the guide for the rest of the week, but also highlights for what happened before. The magazines are right there behind that pillar. I'll let you go now. Thank you very much, and we'll see you here for Systems Thinking after the break.